the healing of your arm. Saying, I called Tom too. I'm speaking generally. Nobody here can tell.
What's provisional is the theory.
I'm not a flat earther. I don't want people thinking that. I believe the earth is a sphere, not a spheroid.
I have my phone, so
I'm saying, Megatron, please, Caleb keeps disrupting the conversations and he's very disruptive. So they'll bring him up again, or Daniel, right? Whoever is bringing Caleb.
It's just it's so funny that to Caleb, everything is anti-Semitic. Like, do you realize that among Christians, I'm one of the people who's like really super reverent to Judaism? And it's just you that bothers me. Okay. Anyway, Smiler, go ahead.
When you're done with Smiler, I'm going to start with you, Steph. I'm curious.
Okay, yeah. So, so I'm aware of the situation where Paul says, eating meat sacrificed to idols is really nothing because the idols are nothing. They're not really truly gods. Things of that nature. My issue is that I only find these things in the context of someone like Paul who is dealing with other nations. His main goal is to the Gentiles. So he has sort of a different situation going on. And this seems to fit in context when he talks about how he'll just go into the market and he'll just eat anything because clearly he's amongst people that have a different culture. But the Mark is really the only text that is where you could even hint that Jesus is sort of suggesting this idea that you don't really have to worry about the dietary guidelines. And with that being the only
just
text,
real quick, it's also in Luke. Luke makes almost exactly the same statement about Christ making all things.
Okay, I have to read that. I thought it was only in Mark.
If you're, let me see. I'm going to try not to die while I do it, but hold on. I had the cross reference. I'm going to just go look for you real quick.
Okay,
Luke 11:41.
Okay, I'll read that.
There's parentheses on that stuff?
Bro, we're not talking about parentheses. You're not understanding how parentheses are used.
Well, stop saying those are Jesus' words. Those are not Jesus' words.
In Luke 11, it is Jesus. Okay. Anyway, just go ahead.
All right, but in Mark, the parentheses is not.
Okay, Mark's commentary agrees with what Jesus said in Luke. Go ahead, Scott.
That's his commentary.
Yeah,
that's the commentary.
That's not the red letter part. This is so distracting.
Yeah, I'll have to read context. This was all the way in verse 41. And I'll read it here in a second. Here, let me just read it out. So, starting at 37. While Jesus was speaking, a Pharisee asked him to dine with them. So he went in and reclined at table. Okay. The Pharisee was astonished to see that he breaking bread. That's how they would eat. Yeah, the Pharisee was astonished to see that he did not first wash before dinner. And the Lord said to him, "Now you Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness, you fools. Did not he who made the outside make the inside also? But give as alms those things that are within, and behold, everything is clean for you. But woe to you Pharisees," and just read one more. "But woe to you Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rule and every herb, and neglect justice and the love of God. These you ought to have done without neglecting others." Even then this, I don't know, for me, again, he's dealing with Jews. Like, it's not like he's going and sitting with a Greek, but he's sitting with a Jew, and this Jew thinks, oh, well, his food isn't even clean for him to eat because he didn't even wash his hands, so it's not proper for him to eat yet. And he seems to be obviously addressing that. But he doesn't seem to be saying, well, no, God, he doesn't seem to be saying, well, no, you have to be pure on the inside, and then basically you can eat whatever you want. He's just sort of rejecting this idea that, oh, if I don't clean my hands, then I can't eat this food. And so, like, I really don't get how a Christian is reading this and saying, oh, look, now I can eat pork.
Again, hand washing, not food.
Okay, the reason is because, let me ask you, Smiler, how do you feel about working on the Sabbath? If you're an EMT and you've got a shift on a Sunday, I'm assuming you think the Sunday is Sabbath. If you're an EMT and you got a shift on a Sunday, how do you reconcile that with your faith?
Yeah, so when the doctors work on the Sabbath.
Yeah, so what I understand is Jesus sort of addresses this explicitly when he talks about how not only mercy and faithfulness is the weightier matters of the law, but even the priests never take a Sabbath because the Levites always were working in the temple even during the Sabbath because they're doing God's work. And he even talks about how if a sheep falls into a pit, will you not grab them out of the thing or out of the pit? And so the point isn't God is not giving you these like strict laws. There's a reason and purpose behind it, and there's always a greater good that can outweigh that law. And this seems to be in line with what Paul was doing. So when Paul's not saying, yes, go eat whatever the hell you want, he's saying there's a circumstance in which you don't need to worry about the nitty gritty, and there's a greater sort of mission going on.
Except, and I agree with you about Paul, except that both Mark and Luke record Christ making all things clean. So there's something beyond, like what you're saying is not necessarily wrong. Like, for example, I'm not just going to go and eat halal with my Muslim friends because it doesn't matter to me. It would be a poor witness to them, and I just don't eat halal for, spiritual reasons anyway, right? I don't want meat sacrificed to idols. So even though Paul says I can, I don't. Like, all things are lawful and not all things are expedient, as Paul puts it. I don't think Jesus is saying at any point, go fry a bunch of bacon in my name. Like, he's saying, like, you guys are so hung up on this and you don't need to be. So in the example about the healing on the Sabbath, there's a reason that the Pharisees were so upset about the healing on the Sabbath. First of all, they're trying to catch it. And second of all, they're like, well, you just broke a law. How can you be who you say you are if you broke a law? It's not that, like, Jesus had to explain to them why he did what he did, because they immediately understood it as something that was blatantly wrong. So Christ is responding to a misunderstanding, what he sees as a misunderstanding here, in that he's saying in all of these occasions, the healing, Luke's account of the hand washing, Mark's account of the hand washing, the food, and then later, Paul talking about the temple, the meat in the shambles or in the market, and then the meat sacrificed to idols. All of these things are pointing to you are free. You are free in Christ. You're free under the new covenant. Again, I have Christian friends who feel convicted to not eat pork, so I'm not going to feed them pork. I'm not going to make them. But I believe that all of us who accept Christ, we are free to. Last thing I'll say about this is that Paul did recognize that some people struggled with it, especially the way that you are. And he said, follow your conscience, right? So he said, just what if you feel convicted not to do something, then don't do it. And if you don't feel convicted but your brother does, don't trip him up. Don't throw a stone in his path and make it harder for him. If your brother doesn't want to drink, don't drink. If your brother doesn't want to eat pork, don't eat pork in front of him. But then there's an occasion where Paul confronted Peter on saying, do not sit here and don't sit here and demand that the Gentiles be Jews while you're trying to tell Jews that we're free in Christ. So there's all of this kind of back and forth, and at the end of the day, the idea is that we have liberty in Christ, but that we need to be focusing on what is God calling us to obedience in. And I think one of the things that Christ and Paul are re-emphasizing is food is not really your problem.
Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch and mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will of love as he will, when, where, and with whom he will. Man has the right to kill those who will thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law. Love under will. The law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Therian, Frida Puderabo, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law. To live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch and mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will of love as he will, when, where, and with whom you will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law. Love under the law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Therian, Freda Puderabo, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. The rights of man, Master Therian, Trader, Bravo, Alistair Crowley, the Master, Alistair Crowley. Carthage, though a commercial republic, was the aggressor in the very war that ended in her destruction. Hannibal had carried her arms into the heart of Italy, to the gates of Rome before Scipio returned. Gave him an overthrow in the territories of Carthage, made a conquest of the Commonwealth. Venice in later times figured more than once in wars of ambition, till becoming an object to the other Italian states. Pope Julius too found means to accomplish that formidable line which gave a deadly blow to the power and pride of this haughty republic. The provinces of Holland, till they were overwhelmed in debts and taxes, took a leading and conspicuous part in the wars of Europe. They had furious contests with England for the dominion of the sea, and were among the most persevering and the most implacable of the opponents of Louis XIV. In the government of Britain, the representatives of the people compose one branch of the national legislature. Commerce has been for ages the predominant pursuit of that country. Few nations, nevertheless, have been more frequently engaged in war. And the wars in which that kingdom has been engaged have, in numerous instances, proceeded from the people. There have been, if I may so express it, almost as many popular as royal wars. The cries of the nation and the importunities of their representatives, upon various occasions, dragged their monarch into war, or continued them in it, contrary to their inclinations, and sometimes contrary to the real interest of the state. In that memorable struggle for superiority between the rival houses of Austria and Barbary, which so long kept Europe in a flame, it is well known that the antipathies of the English against the French, seconding the ambition, or rather the avarice, of a favorite leader, then protracted the war beyond the limits marked out by sound policy, and for considerable time in opposition to the views of the court. The wars of these two last-mentioned nations have in a great measure grown out of commercial considerations, the desire of supplanting and the fear of being supplanted, either in particular branches of traffic or in the general advantages of trade and navigation. From this summary of what's taken place in other countries, whose situations have borne the nearest resemblance to our own, what reason can we have to confide in those reveries, which would seduce us into an expectation of peace? separation. Have we not already seen enough of the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories which have amused us with promises of exemption from the imperfections, weaknesses, and evils incident to society in every shade? Is it not time to awake from the deceitful dream of a golden age and to adopt as a practical maxim for the direction of our political conduct that we, as well as the other inhabitants of the globe, are yet remote from the happy empire of perfect wisdom, the perfect virtue, at the point of extreme depression to which our national dignity and credit have sunk. Let the inconveniences felt everywhere from a lax and ill administration of government. Let the revolt of a part of the state of North Carolina, the late menacing disturbances in Pennsylvania, and the actual insurrections and rebellions in Massachusetts declare. I need to be free of those telling me what to do in order to attain my real fulfillment. If I suppress my sensual impulses and urges, I may do harm to my natural development. I am a mature person. I can read whatever I wish, or watch whatever kind of TV program or movies I wish. It doesn't affect me at all if I always say no to others in regard to sex or drugs or alcohol. I will never be accepted by others. I will never have any friends. I don't need confession. I haven't any graces. And besides, if I stay away more, there will be less danger of routine confessions. My prayers don't seem to be answered. Seem to be answered. So what is the use of praying? My conscience is the only God I need. As long as I am at peace with my conscience, I need not worry, even if somebody asks. And decisions, oh, that I don't always with the teachings of church and so on without end is the cleverness of the evil one in exploiting our weaknesses, likes and dislikes. I need to be free of those telling me what to do in order to attain my real fulfillment. If I suppress my sensual impulses and urges, I may do harm to my natural development. I am a mature person. I can read whatever I wish, or watch whatever kind of TV program or movies I wish. It doesn't affect me at all if I always say no to others in regard to sex or drugs or alcohol. I will never be accepted by others. I will never have any friends. I don't need confession. I've been any graces. And besides, if I stay away more, there will be less. flaming sword. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry, Merry Christmas. Take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. 10, 9, 11, 10, 9, 9. Hold, 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 let it go, 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 go. Santa baby, oh my little Santa baby, Santa baby, oh my little Santa baby, Santa baby, oh my little Santa baby. Strike the master chord, draw the flaming sword. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry, Merry Christmas. Take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. 10, not 11, 10, not 9. Hold, 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 let it go, 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 go. Santa baby, my little Santa baby, Santa baby, my little Santa baby, Santa baby, oh my little Santa baby. Strike the master chord, draw the flaming sword. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry, Merry Christmas. Take the deepest breath of the day and hold for 10 seconds. 10, not 11, 10, 9. Hold, 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 hold. Let it go, 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 go. There's 7 keys to the great gate, being 8 and 1 and 1 and 8. First, let the body of thee be still, bound by the cerements of will. Court frigid thus thou mayst abort, the fidget babes, the tease, the thought. Next, let with the great seas, Pacific swoon. Third, let thy life be pure and calm. Sway softly as a well to live be bound. To the one love of the profound. Fifth, let the thought divine be free from sense, observe its entity. Watch every thought that springs enhance. Hour after hour, thy vigilance. Intense and keen turned inwardness. No atom of six on my thoughts securely pinned. Still every whisper of the wind. So like a flame strand I stirred. Burn up thy being in one wind. Still that ecstasy prolonged. The meditation deep and strong. Slaying even God should he distract thy attention from the chosen act. All these things in one orb time. At the midnight blossom flower, the one that sits yet even in this my son, no shall not do if thou restrain the expression of truth, thy glance to rapture's darkling roof. Discarding name for science, stress, even in his consciousness. Pierce to the heart, I leave thee here, thou art the master, I reveal. Thy radiance that rolls apart. There are 7 keys to the great gate, being 8 and 1 and 1 and 8. First, let the body of thee be still, bound by the cerements of will. Corpse rigid thus thou mayst abort, the fidget babes that tease the thought. Next, let the breath rhythm be low, easy, regular, and slow, so that thy beat be in tune with the great seas, Pacific swoon. Learn thy life pure and calm, sway softly as a well till life be bound to the one of the profound. Fifth, let the thought divinely free from sense observe its entity. Watch every thought springs enhance. Hour after all thy vigilance, intense and keen turned inwardness. No atom of analysis. not securely pinned, still every whisper of the wind. So like a flame straight and unstirred, burn up by being in one word. Next till that ecstasy prolonged by meditations deep and strong. Slaying even God should he distract thy attention from the chosen act. Blast all these things in one our power. Time that midnight blossom flower, the one that is yet even in this. My son, thou shalt not do amiss. So like a flame straight and unstirred, burn up thy being in one word. Next till that ecstasy prolonged, my meditations deep and strong. Slaying even God should he distract thy attention from the chosen act. Bless all these things in one power. Time like the midnight blossom flower. The one that says yet even this, my son, thou shalt not do amiss. The utility of a confederacy, as well to suppress faction and to guard the internal tranquility of states, as to increase their external force and security, is in reality not a new idea. It has been practiced upon in different countries and ages, and has received the sanction of the most approved writers on the subject of politics. The opponents of the plan proposed have, with greatest ado, cited and circulated observations of Montesquieu on the necessity of a contracted territory for a republican government. But they seem not to have been apprised of the sentiments of that great man expressed in another part of his work, nor to have adverted to the consequences of the principle to which they subscribe with such ready acquiescence. When Montesquieu recommends a small extent for republic, the standards he had in view were of dimensions far short of the limits of almost every one of these states. Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, North Carolina, nor Georgia can by any means be compared with the models from which he reasoned and to which the terms of his description apply. If we therefore take his ideas on this point as the criterion of truth, we shall be driven to the alternative either of taking refuge at once in the arms of monarchy, or of splitting ourselves into an infinity of little jealous, clashing, tumultuous commonwealths, the wretched nurseries of unceasing discord, and the miserable objects of universal pity or contempt. Some of the writers who have come forward on the other side of the question seem to have been aware of the dilemma, and have even been bold enough to hint at the division of the larger states as a desirable thing. Such an infatuated policy, such a desperate expedient might, by the multiplication of petty offices, answer the views of men who possess not qualifications to extend their influence beyond the narrow circles of personal intrigue. But it could never promote the greatness or happiness of the people of America. In the wide field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theater for hostile pretensions, without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania respecting the land at Wyoming admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation oblige the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. But Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction. With that determination, she appeared to be entirely resigned to it. But it was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance and determinations to their disadvantage. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between this state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced, as well from states not interested as from those which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had this state attempted to assert its rights by force. Two motives preponderated in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power. The other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states who had obtained grants of lands under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember this state than to establish their own pretensions. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, upon all occasions discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont. And Maryland, till alarmed by the appearance of a connection between Canada and that state, entered deeply into the same views. These, being small states, saw with an unfriendly eye the perspective of our growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes which would be likely to embroil the states with each other, if it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The states less favorably circumstanced would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantages of their more fortunate neighbors. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse on the basis of equal privileges to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of this circumstance. We should be ready to denominate injuries those things which were in reality the justifiable acts of independent, so far aimed is consulting a distinct interest, the spirit of enterprise which characterizes the commercial part of America has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them on the other, would naturally lead to outrages, and these to reprisals and wars. The utility of a confederacy, as well to suppress faction and to guard the internal tranquility of states, as to increase their external force and security, is in reality not a new idea. It has been practiced upon in different countries and ages, and has received the sanction of the most approved writers. On the subject of politics, the opponents of the plan proposed have, with great assiduity, cited and circulated the observations of Montesquieu on the necessity of a contracted territory for a Republican government. But they seem not to have been apprised of the sentiments of that great man expressed in another part of his work, nor to have adverted to the consequences of the principle to which they subscribe with such ready acquiescence. But Montesquieu had in view were of dimensions far short of the limits of almost every one of these states. Not Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, North Carolina, nor Georgia can by any means be compared with the models from which he reasoned and to which the terms of his description apply. If we therefore take his ideas on this point as the criterion of truth, we shall be driven to the alternative, either of taking refuge at once in the arms of monarchy, or splitting ourselves into an infinity of little jealous, clashing, tumultuous commonwealths, the wretched nurseries of unceasing discord, and the miserable objects of universal pity or contempt. Some of the writers who have come forward on the other side of the question seem to have been aware of the dilemma, and have even been bold enough to hint at the division of the larger states as a desirable thing. Such an infatuated policy, such a desperate expedient might, by the multiplication of petty offices, answer the views of men who possess not qualifications to extend their influence beyond the narrow circles of personal intrigue. But it could never promote the greatness or happiness of the people of America.
Federalist No. 7. The same subject continued, concerning dangers from dissensions between the states. For the Independent Journal, Alexander Hamilton. To the people of the state of New York, it is sometimes asked, with an air of seeming triumph, what inducements could the states have, if disunited, to make war upon each other? It would be a full answer to this question to say, precisely the same inducements which have at different times deluged in blood all the nations in the world. But unfortunately for us, the question admits of a more particular answer. There are causes of differences within our immediate contemplation, of the tendency of which, even under the restraints of a federal constitution, we have had sufficient experience to enable us to form a judgment of what might be expected if those restraints were removed. Territorial disputes have at all times been found one of the most fertile sources of hostility among nations. Perhaps the greatest proportion of wars that have desolated the earth have sprung from this origin. This cause would exist among us in full force. We have a vast tract of unsettled territory within the boundaries of the United States. There still are discordant and undecided claims between several of them, and the dissolution of the Union would lay a foundation for similar claims between them all. It is well known that they have heretofore had serious and animated discussion concerning the rights to the lands which were ungranted at the time of the Revolution, and which usually went under the name of Crown lands. The states within the limits of whose colonial governments they were comprised have claimed them as their property. The others have contended that the rights of the Crown in this article devolved upon the Union, especially as to all that part of the Western Territory which, either by actual possession or through the submission of the Indian proprietors, was subjected to the jurisdiction of the King of Great Britain, till it was relinquished in the Treaty of Peace. This, it has been said, that all events and acquisition to the Confederacy by compact with a foreign power. It has been the prudent policy of Congress to appease this controversy by prevailing upon the states to make cessions to the United States for the benefit of the whole. This has been so far accomplished as, under a continuation of the Union, to afford a decided prospect of an amicable termination of the dispute. A dismemberment of the Confederacy, however, would revive this dispute and would create others on the same subject. At present, a large part of the vacant Western Territory is, by cession at least, if not by any anterior right, the common property of the Union. If that were at an end, the states which made cession on a principle of federal compromise would be apt when the motive of the grant had ceased to reclaim the lands as a reversion. The other states would no doubt insist on a proportion by right of representation. Their argument would be that a grant once made could not be revoked, and that the justice of participating in territory acquired or secured by the joint efforts of the Confederacy remained undiminished. If, contrary to probability, it should be admitted by all the states that each had a right to a share of this common stock, there would still be a difficulty to be surmounted as to a proper rule of apportionment. Different principles would be set up by different states for this purpose, and as they would affect the opposite interests of the parties, they might not easily be susceptible of a pacific adjustment. To the people of the state of New York, it is not a new observation that the people of any country, if like the Americans, intelligent and well-informed, and steadily persevere for many years in an erroneous opinion respecting their interest, the consideration naturally tends to create great respect for the high opinion which the people of America have so long and uniformly entertained of the importance of their continuing firmly united under one federal government, vested with sufficient powers for all general and national purposes. The more attentively I consider and investigate the reasons which appear to have given birth to this opinion, the more I become convinced that they are cogent and conclusive. Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be the first. The safety of the people doubtless has relation to a great variety of circumstances and considerations, and consequently affords great latitude to those who wish to define it precisely and comprehensively. At present, I mean only to consider it as it respects security for the preservation of peace and tranquility, as well as against dangers from foreign arms and influence, as from dangers of the like kind arising from domestic causes. As the former of these comes first in order, it is proper, it should be the first discussed. Let us therefore proceed to examine whether the people are not right in their opinion that a cordial union under an efficient national government affords them the best security that can be devised against hostilities from abroad. The number of wars which have happened or will happen in the world will always be found to be in proportion to the number and weight of the causes, whether real or pretended, which provoke or invite them. If this remark be just, it becomes useful to inquire whether so many just causes of war are likely to be given by United America as by Sunny America. For if it should turn out that United America will probably give the fewest, then it will follow that in this respect the Union tends most to preserve the people in a state of peace with other nations. Because when once an efficient national government is established, the best men in the country will not only consent to serve, but also will generally be appointed to manage it. For although town or country, or other contracted influence, may place men in state assemblies, or senates, or courts of justice, or executive departments, yet more general and extensive reputation for talents and other qualifications will be necessary to recommend men to offices under the national government, especially as it will have the widest field for choice,
never experienced the want of proper person, which is not uncommon in some of the states. Hence, it will result that the administration, the political councils, and the judicial decisions of the national government will be more wise, systematical, and judicious than those of individual states, and consequently more satisfactory with respect to other nations, as well as more safe with respect to us. Because under the national government, treaties and articles of treaties, as well as the laws of nations, will always be expounded in one sense and executed in the same manner. Whereas adjudications of the same points and questions in 13 states or in 3 or 4 confederacies will not always accord or be consistent, and that, as well from the variety of independent courts and judges appointed by different and independent governments, as from the different local laws and interests, which may affect and influence them. The wisdom of the convention in committing such questions to the jurisdiction judgment of courts appointed by and responsible only to one national government cannot be too much commended, because the prospect of present loss or advantage may often tempt the governing party in 1 or 2 states to swerve from good faith and justice. But those temptations or no influence on the national government, temptation will be fruitless, and good faith and justice be preserved. Keys of the treaty of peace, wherein adds great weight to this reasoning, because even if the governing party in a state should be disposed to resist such temptations, yet as such temptations may and commonly do result from circumstances peculiar to the state, and may affect a great number of the inhabitants. The governing party may not always be able, if willing, to prevent the injustice meditated, or to punish the aggressors. But the national government
as a barrier against domestic faction and insurrection. It is impossible to read the history of the petty republics of Greece and Italy without feeling sensations of horror and disgust at the distractions with which they were continually agitated, and at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept in a state of perpetual vibration between the extremes of tyranny and anarchy. If they exhibit occasional calms, these only serve as short-lived contrasts to the furious storms that are to succeed. If now and then intervals of felicity open to view, we behold them with a mixture of regret arising from the reflection that the pleasing scenes before us are soon to be overwhelmed by the tempestuous waves of sedition and party rage. If momentary rays of glory break the gloom while they dazzle us with a transient and fleeting brilliancy, they at the same time admonish us to lament that the vices of government should pervert the direction and tarnish the luster of those bright talents and exalted endowments for which the favored soils that produce them have been so justly celebrated. From the disorders that disfigure the annals of those republics, the advocates of despotism have drawn arguments, not only against the forms of republican government, but against the very principles of civil liberty. They have decried all free government as inconsistent with the order of society and have indulged themselves in malicious exultation over its friends and partisans happily for mankind. Stupendous fabrics reared on the basis of liberty, which have flourished for ages, have, in a few glorious instances, refuted their gloomy sophisms, and, I trust, America will be the broad and solid foundation of other edifices, not less magnificent, which will be equally permanent monuments of their errors. It is not to be denied that the portraits they have sketched of Republican government were too just copies of the originals from which they were taken. If it had been found impractical to have devised models of a more perfect structure, the enlightened friends to liberty would have been obliged to abandon the cause of that species of government as indefensible. The science of politics, however, like most other sciences, has received great improvement. The efficacy of various principles is now well understood, which were either not known at all or imperfectly known to the ancients. The regular distribution of power into distinct departments, the introduction of legislative balances and checks, the institution of courts composed of judges holding their offices during good behavior, the representation of the people in the legislature by deputies of their own election. These are wholly new discoveries, or have made their principal progress towards perfection in modern times. They are means, and powerful means, by which the excellences of Republican government may be retained and its imperfections lessened or avoided. To this catalog of circumstances that tend to the amelioration of popular systems of civil government, I shall venture, however novel it may appear to some, to add one more on a principle which has been made the foundation of an objection to the new Constitution. I mean, the enlargement of the orbit within which such systems are to revolve, either in respect to the dimensions of a single state or the consolidation of several smaller states into one great confederacy. The latter is that which immediately concerns the object under consideration. It will, however, be of use to examine the principle in its application to a single state, which shall be attended to in another place.
The opportunities which some states would have of rendering others tributary to them by commercial regulations would be impatiently submitted to by the tributary states. The relative situation of New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey would afford an example of this kind. New York, from the necessities of revenue, must lay duties on her importations. A great part of these duties must be paid by the inhabitants of the two other states in the capacity of consumers of what we import. New York would neither be willing nor able to forego this advantage. Her citizens would not consent that a duty paid by them should be remitted in favor of the citizens of her neighbors. Nor would it be practicable if there were not this impediment in the way to distinguish the customers in our own markets. Would Connecticut and New Jersey long submit to be taxed by New York for her exclusive
able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the one side and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? These are questions that temerity alone will answer in the affirmative. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. The apportionment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterward would be alike productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? There is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from real objections. These, as usual, would be exaggerated by the adverse interest of the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them either less impressed with the importance of national credit or because their citizens have little, if any, immediate interest in the question, feel an indifference if not a repugnance to the payment of domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of a distribution. Others of them, a numerous body whose citizens are creditors to the public beyond proportion of the state and the total amount of the national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable and effective provision. Procrastinations of the former would excite the resentments of the latter. The settlement of a rule would, in the meantime, be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delays. The citizens of the states interested would clamor. Foreign powers would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands. And the peace of the states would be hazarded to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. In the wide field of Western territory, therefore, we perceive an ample theatre for hostile pretensions, without any umpire or common judge to interpose between the contending parties. To reason from the past to the future, we shall have good ground to apprehend that the sword would sometimes be appealed to as the arbiter of their differences. The circumstances of the dispute between Connecticut and Pennsylvania, respecting the land at Wyoming, admonish us not to be sanguine in expecting an easy accommodation of such differences. The Articles of Confederation oblige the parties to submit the matter to the decision of a federal court. The submission was made, and the court decided in favor of Pennsylvania. But Connecticut gave strong indications of dissatisfaction with that determination, nor did she appear to be entirely resigned to it, till by negotiation and management, something like an equivalent was found for the loss she supposed herself to have sustained. Nothing here said is intended to convey the slightest censure on the conduct of that state. She no doubt sincerely believed herself to have been injured by the decision, and states, like individuals, acquiesce with great reluctance in determinations to their disadvantage. Those who had an opportunity of seeing the inside of the transactions which attended the progress of the controversy between this state and the District of Vermont can vouch the opposition we experienced, as well from states not interested as from those which were interested in the claim, and can attest the danger to which the peace of the Confederacy might have been exposed had the state attempted to assert its rights by force. Two motives preponderated in that opposition. One, a jealousy entertained of our future power, and the other, the interest of certain individuals of influence in the neighboring states who had obtained grants of lands under the actual government of that district. Even the states which brought forward claims in contradiction to ours seemed more solicitous to dismember this state than to establish their own pretensions. These were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Upon all occasions, discovered a warm zeal for the independence of Vermont. In Maryland, connection between Canada and that state enter deeply into the same views. These being small states saw with an unfriendly eye the perspective of our growing greatness. In a review of these transactions, we may trace some of the causes which would be likely to embroil the states with each other if it should be their unpropitious destiny to become disunited. The competitions of commerce would be another fruitful source of contention. The states less favorably circumstanced would be desirous of escaping from the disadvantages of local situation and of sharing in the advantages of their more fortunate neighbors. Each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions, which would beget discontent. The habits of intercourse are the basis of equal privileges, to which we have been accustomed since the earliest settlement of the country, would give a keener edge to those causes of discontent than they would naturally have independent of this circumstance. We should be ready to denominate entities consulting a distant interest, the spirit of enterprise which characterizes the commercial part of America has left no occasion of displaying itself unimproved. It is not at all probable that this unbridled spirit would pay much respect to those regulations of trade by which particular states might endeavor to secure exclusive benefits to their own citizens. The infractions of these regulations, on one side, the efforts to prevent and repel them, on the other, would naturally lead to outrages, and these to reprisals and wars. The ambitious Cardinal, who was Prime Minister to Henry Lit, permitting his vanity to aspire to the Triple Crown, Five entertained hopes of succeeding in the acquisition of that splendid prize by the influence of the Emperor Charles V. To secure the favor and interest of this enterprising and powerful monarch, he precipitated England into a war with France, contrary to the plainest dictates of policy, and at the hazard of the safety and dependence, as well of the kingdom over which he presided by his counsels, as of Europe in general. For if there ever was a sovereign who bid fair to realize the project of universal monarchy, it was the Emperor Charles V, of whose intrigues Wolsey was at once the instrument and the dupe. The influence which the pity of one female sinks the petulance of another, and the cabals of a third, ate had in the contemporary policy, ferments and pacifications of a considerable part of Europe are topics that have been too often descanted upon not to be generally known. To multiply examples of the agency of personal considerations in the production of great national events, either foreign or domestic, according to their direction, would be an unnecessary waste of time. Those who have but a superficial acquaintance with the sources from which they are to be drawn will themselves recollect a variety of instances, and those who have a tolerable knowledge of human nature will not stand in need of such lights to form their opinion, either of the reality or extent of that agency. Perhaps, however, a reference tending to illustrate the general principle may with propriety be made to a case which has lately happened among ourselves. If Shays had not been a desterry debtor, it is much to be doubted whether Massachusetts would have been plunged into a civil war. But notwithstanding the concurring testimony of experience, in this particular, there are still to be found visionary or designing men who stand ready to advocate the paradox of perpetual peace between the states, though dismembered and alienated from each other. The genius genius of republics. The spirit of commerce has a tendency to soften the manners of men and to extinguish those inflammable humors which have so often kindled into wars. Commercial republics like ours will never be disposed to waste themselves in ruinous contentions with each other. They will be governed by mutual interest and will cultivate a spirit of mutual amity and concord. Concerning dangers from dissension between the states, for the Independent Journal. Alec Alexander Hamilton to the people of the state of New York. The three last numbers of this paper have been dedicated to an enumeration of the dangers to which we should be exposed in a state of disunion from the arms and arts of foreign nations. I shall now proceed to delineate dangers of a different and perhaps still more alarming kind. Those which will, in all probability, flow from dissensions between the states themselves and from domestic factions and convulsions. These have been already in some instances slightly anticipated, but they deserve a more particular and more full investigation. A man must be far gone in utopian speculations who can seriously doubt that if these states should either be wholly disunited or only united in partial confederacies, the subdivisions into which they might be thrown would have frequent and violent contest with each other. To presume a want of motives for such contest as an argument against their existence would be to forget that men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious, to look for a continuation of harmony between a number of independent, unconnected sovereignties in the same neighborhood would be to disregard the uniform course of human events and to set at defiance the accumulated experience of ages. The causes of hostility among nations are innumerable. There are some which have a general and almost constant operation upon the collective bodies of society. Of this description are the love of power, or the desire of preeminence and dominion, the jealousy of power, or the desire of equality and safety. There are others which have a more circumscribed, though an equally operative influence within their sphere. Such are the rivalships and competitions of commerce between commercial nations, and there are others, not less numerous than either of the former, which take their origin entirely in private passion, in the attachments, enmities, interests, hopes, and fears of leading individuals in the communities of which they are members. Men of this class, whether the favorites of a king or of a people, have in too many instances abused the confidence they possess, and assuming the pretext of some public motive, to sacrifice the national tranquility to personal advantage or personal gratification.
In a letter of the 1st July, 7-7, Dutch Parliament makes some observations on the importance of the union then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with one or two extracts from it. An entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure your religion, liberty, and property. Remove the animosities amongst yourselves and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union the whole island being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interest, will be enabled to resist all its enemies. We most earnestly recommend to you calmness and unanimity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to a happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless on this occasion use their utmost endeavors to prevent or delay this union. It was remarked in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them. Although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another. Notwithstanding their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept inflamed, and for a long series of years they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished? Instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehension of different interests, envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection and the partial interests of each confederacy, instead of the general interests of all America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other bordering nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war, or live in the constant apprehension of them. of the 1st July, M1786, to the Scotch Parliament make some observations on the importance of the union then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with one or two extracts from it. An entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure your religion, liberty, and property. Remove the animosities amongst yourselves and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union the whole island, being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interest, will be ennobly to resist all its enemies. We most earnestly recommend to you calmness and unanimity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to a happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless on this occasion use their utmost endeavors to prevent or delay this union. It was remarked in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them, although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another, notwithstanding their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same. Yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept inflamed, and for a long series of years they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished, instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehension of different interest, envy, and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection, and the partial interests of each confederacy, instead of the general interests of all America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other bordering nations, of the people of the state of New York. To the people of the state of New York, Queen Anne in her letter of the 1st July, 1786, to the Scotch Parliament, make some observations on the importance of the union then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with one or two extracts from it. An entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure your religion, liberty, and morality. Remove the animosities amongst yourselves and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union the whole island being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interests, will be end to resist all its enemies. We most earnestly recommend to you calmness and unanimity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to a happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless on this occasion use their huge best endeavors to prevent or delay this union. It was remarked in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it costs them. Although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another. Notwithstanding their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept inflamed, and for a long series of years they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished, instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehension of different interest? Envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection, and the partial interests of each confederacy, instead of the general interests of all America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other bordering nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war, or live in the constant apprehension of them. Name in her letter of the 1st July, in 1086 to the Scotch Parliament, makes some observations on the importance of the Union, then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with one or two extracts from it. An entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure your religion, liberty, and property. Remove the animosities amongst yourselves and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union the whole island, being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interests, will be able to resist all its enemies. We most earnestly recommend to you calmness and unity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to a happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless on this occasion use their useless endeavors to prevent or delay this union. It was remarked in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them. Although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another. Notwithstanding their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, mutual jealousies were perpetually kept in flame. And for a long series of years, they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise, and be in like manner cherished, instead of their being joined in affection, and free from all apprehension of different interests? Envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection, and the partial interests of each confederacy, instead of the general interests of all of America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other bordering nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war, or live in the constant apprehension of them.
need to actually be just fucking like killed. Like that's what we need. Like all of them are just like the same fucking like vile, fat, disgusting creature that just screeches in this insufferable accent.
Sound like you had a bad experience, man.
Well, the bad experience was encountering like just any and all fucking British. That was the bad experience.
I know you're British.
Oh yeah, but
Oh shit.
This cat had the date with
Danny did a really good job.
Who's this?
He just taught his idealism.
rapper guy was
He's not a rock.
He is a rapper.
No, he's a rap. Oh, rapper. I think he's a rock.
He's black.
Yeah, he's a rap. That's not why.
I didn't see it on the big.
It's a partial explanation, at least.
So, Bob,
Danny is in
really,
Danny Photo.
yes, yeah, it wasn't really much of a debate. It was more of a discussion on what Biscuit thinks God is, and then his idealistic ideologies.
I'm not surprised.
I haven't seen it. I doubt it's worth watching like at all.
Nah, it's okay.
Sounds really boring.
It's somewhat entertaining, but Biscuit holds the idea that Biscuit holds the idea that all things are fundamentally because of
James, you're roboting James.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's true. Other than that,
It's true. It is not.
but if I can seriously hate you, Andrea, like you will just like insist to have conversations with like just the most intransigent pieces of trash on the planet.
Especially
That's the conversation
dishonest.
you'll
Like
do.
everything that she said was misrepresenting him in the most awful way. Like it was just twisted and not genuine. Like at some point you have to realize that somebody isn't like there's people who are actually listening to know more about you and know your perspective, and there's people who are just assholes and they just want to be like, I don't know.
Exactly right. Exactly correct. And that's the thing with Andrew. Like, he has honest people around him, and like you could try to have conversations with them, where like he learns about their views and like has them tell them something he doesn't know, or like he tells them something they don't know. Like, he doesn't give a shit to have those conversations. Like, a fucking butterfly will flap its wings in Uganda and be like, sorry, buddy, something came up, I got to deal with this. And then, like, okay, like, fucking honey badger farted. Okay, I need to address this. Like, drop everything. You know, stop running the house, you know. The car will drive itself. I don't give a fuck. I need to deal with honey badger.
Okay, you make some excellent points, but there's also balance. Like one thing that I do like is that Andrew, like, so there's a lot of people, I won't mention any names, but they treat people like everybody's like below them, and if you don't have the same standard, like, I like that Andrew meets people where they are. Like, I like that.
But there are definitely those kinds of people.
But let's say that they don't have the same aptitude, or they don't have the same IQ, or let's say that they don't have the same information, he'll kind of meet them where they are. I don't like when he entertains trolls, though. Yeah. That's what I don't like.
But I think that even those people who kind of have this, like, you know, air of superiority, like, even they, like, a lot of the time they are willing to meet people where they're at, as long as, like, they don't think, like, someone's being, like, really dishonest. Like, if someone genuinely asks them something, like, they will engage. So, like, you have to, like, keep that in mind as well. going on with Trump kidnapping the Venezuelan guy? What's up with that?
Say it again.
They fucking yanked him.
What's up with Trump kidnapping the president of Venezuela?
I mean, now you have precedent to go kidnap Netanyahu. You know, like if the president of is qualified to be kidnapped, then I know who is. Somebody can go and kidnap him and bring him to trial. Like, what are we doing now? Everything is just free.
He doesn't have any order.
Yeah, exactly right.
I wonder, I feel like that operation, just wouldn't work in Israel. Like, not that, Israel would, beat America in a war, but just, you couldn't actually do this kind of, go away and kidnap the president in Israel. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could arrest him when he is in the U.S.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suspicion, multiple elements within the Venezuelan military and security apparatus work with you.
I mean, I guess, but your military is kind of shit in the first place, isn't it?
It's complete garbage.
But this has happened before. It happened in 1988 or 89 with Noriega in Panama, where Noriega was charged with drug trafficking, or being connected with drug trafficking, facilitating drug trafficking, and the U.S. government went in and deposed him. But the difference between then and now is that when it was done in the 80s, they officially appointed someone as the interim head of state or whatever, and then they got that person's permission, because all of these law enforcement state law enforcement actions that end up affecting governments of other states are supposed to be cleared through the local government, right? And they always have been, except for this one time where the Trump administration decided not to appoint someone as the local representative, and B, if they had appointed someone, they should have then cleared it with that person before they took the actual initiative to do the extraction.
What's the charge of the guy? What are they?
Drug trafficking. I think it's drugs and guns.
Was he's involved?
Facilitating the trafficking of drugs and guns.
I see. I mean, is that even plausible or no?
No, it's a legit charge. It's coming out of the state court of New York, right? I don't think it's a political charge. It could be, but I don't think it is. I think it's legit.
Serious reason for saying that it's good.
I think if the charge is if the conviction is correct, then I think there probably is good reason to think that he was doing it. But I haven't looked at that deep to know what what he was convicted of exactly.
What's the charge? Eating the succulent Chinese meat. You know the video?
I do not.
Big guy is getting arrested by 20 officers. It's what's the charge? Eating a succulent Chinese meal.
It's fucking yanked.
Canadian.
What is the job? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
Wait, but Millet, you would agree that Sully is one of the dumbest people in Clubhouse, right?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely, Sasha.
I'm not even saying that dumb is one of them. Because he says shit like that. Coco the gorilla has never said anything that's stupid.
They swore in his like VP, which is weird. If you're gonna claim that the government is a legit everything,
Well, the America swore in Maduro.
yeah,
Guy.
it's fucking hilarious. It's like interim president. It's probably because she's just going to do like whatever they want. It's just funny how they're undermining their own justifications.
Right. No, it's kind of crazy that like you have like all these countries where like you can just go there and like destroy them and like nothing happens.
Oh, that is funny. Just like, yeah. It's crazy how little of a fight they actually put up.
Right.
A little who put up.
Venezuelan.
Oh my God, they want to get rid of that guy. Well, the army doesn't, but the people do.
It was someone
Claim that like apparently the people wanted Mr. Like, is there any confirmation of this or what's the?
they wanted him, or
They wanted him out of like they are
Yeah, I think-
celebrating.
I think there's been polling around this. I think in a vacuum, the people of Venezuela wanted the Maduro regime out and think that the 2019 election was fraudulent that kept the Maduro regime in. But, you know, just because you want them out doesn't mean like you want them out this way. Kind of.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the regime is still standing if his VP is in power. It's like, you know, the VP was a good part of it. It's just like the VP took over. It's not like you fixed the corrupt election.
no, that was kind of my point earlier as well. It was like installing the VP as president. It's just, I don't know, legitimizes that whole thing. I assume they're gonna have elections at some point. It's like Trump. I don't know.
Yo, Sasha,
What's up?
I heard you talk to Eric. You know what day that was when it was reported?
I don't think I looked recently or
I thought I heard anything mentioning it in the Killism room. So
I didn't think I talked. I talked with Samoa, and then I had
no.
exchange with Luca, I think is the guy's name.
No, it wasn't in that room. He said it was in the Andrew room. I just heard him mentioning the interaction in the children. I'll ask him about it again.
Yeah. I don't remember at all.
He said Eric started out. Oh, okay. Maybe in a Roger room. Yeah, I heard that conversation with Roger.
Yeah, it was fun.
I mean, I like Roger. I don't think he's a good debater, but I don't like hate him or anything. But he's like cringe in these arguments.
Because look, like Rogers on like all these crazy TV programs that are like, you know, like only like 1 in a billion people can get in there, and he's like trained in atheism by promoting himself the best atheist philosopher in history and today. Okay, and like, you know, he's got all these elite classes. He's got various like And then like there's very powerful. I'm like in a country where like you can't even like read like any of the philosophy texts. Like I get like scrapes of like the pages delivered by
written on cabbage leaves.
So, right. So it's like, you know, like the dark horse, the runner up, the David versus Goliath, and I still went home. I was crazy.
How does Sasha do it, guys? It's unreal.
It's unreal, bro.
It's probably because you're like double gay compared to a single gay Sasha. You know, it's a double power.
Right.
You know, what were you so like why did you so I'll start again. You heard a debate with Roger. Why was it so offensive to you?
No, I wasn't.
Why was the debate with Roger offensive?
Are you talking to me or Sasha? I couldn't tell with that.
Talking to you, gay.
No, it wasn't like offensive. It's just like I know Roger. I've talked to or not Roger, Eric. I've talked to him before. I was interested in the conversation topic that happened.